Senator Sanders isn't a Democrat, he's an ideologue. And we've got to get practical.
Does practical mean that the 89 or so million people who are uninsured or underinsured in this country continue to suffer? Does being practical mean that we don't take steps in this country to deal with climate chaos and bring world leaders to bear? Does being practical mean that we continue to prop up a legal system that is unjust in every stretch of the imagination, that bears its weight down on black men and black women, and then by extension, if you are Hispanic or indigenous or poor? Does being practical mean that we don't say to the American people that you deserve better than what you are getting?
So among the many issues with the moderate Democrat approach to governing the United States is that really they're just outdated. The way that they do things is no longer needed. They came along when things were pretty decent in the economy. You know, things were pretty level. The United States was in a good position worldwide. The Republican Party had yet to go full-blown nuts and crazy. They were already there, but they had yet to go full-blown psycho. But see, the moderate Democrat approach allowed them to go into that full-blown psycho, to where now Donald Trump is the most popular political figure in the country, which is ridiculous, but that's just what it is.
That's not the kind of practicality we want. Does practical mean that you hold fundraisers and wine caves with Swarovski crystals with billionaires who want to control this system? Does practical mean we continue to go with the status quo while 500,000 people sleep on the streets at night? That's not practicality. So with all due respect to Mr. Carville, what the American people in this country need, they need somebody that is unabashed and that has the courage and the conviction to stand up for them and to call out the rigging of this system.
That is what the moderate Democrat approach has led to. It's led to an out-of-control Republican Party, as well as the opposition party, which is supposed to be the Democrats, completely lacking the will to get anything done at all.
In order to get to a revolution, you've got to take steps. You've got to get to a practical place to make those changes.
Stephanie, the elites in 1930 said the same thing about FDR. And he said, I welcome your hatred. These are the same people that if the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive, when he stood up before he was gunned down and he said to this country, he said the evils of this country, militarism, materialism, poverty, and racism. Those are those same people. So now if President FDR had listened to those people, or if the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King had listened to those people, we would not progress as a nation. So every generation, we got the naysayers, baby.
I mean, we talk about this here all the time. How is it that the Biden administration isn't just axing student loan debt? Because it's to protect the banks. That's what it is. It's just to protect the banks, because they pretend like, well, not the Biden administration, but kind of the conservative argument against getting rid of student loan debt is that, well, it'll raise taxes. Okay, well, then legalize marijuana, collect those taxes, and raise taxes on billionaires. Voila. The rest of that gap can afford the loss. Cut the military budget a little bit. These are easy fixes, but it's just about protecting the banks. However, if Joe Biden were to do things like, eliminate just half of student loan debt, that would make him a legend. And if he got rid of all of it, that would make him a super legend, because that would transform tens of millions of people's lives. It would put so much money into people's pockets who are just basically slaves to paying their student loan debt. Even doctors and lawyers never pay off that debt because they owe so much and they just end up paying the interest. He won't do that for the sake of his own popularity. That's what's wrong with the moderate Democrat approach.
What people need is to be able to call upon somebody that's not going to capitulate. Stephanie, why can't we have both? I reject, and so do the American people, the whole notion that you cannot say to a system that it must change and also push a dream and a vision that is bigger than what we have right now. Who wants somebody that's saying to the workaday people of this nation, I'm going to run for office, but you only going to get more of the same?
The best way to sum up the moderate Democrat approach is by a letter that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in 1963 from a Birmingham jail. You could check that out online, and I'll just read half of it now. And it goes, "First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will.
Well, it shouldn't scare people. I mean, it's very much in the tradition of President FDR. It's in the same spirit. It's in the spirit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who in his letter to the Birmingham jail warned us being the black community, about white moderates.
You know, Nina referenced Dr. Martin Luther King before, saying that he said from the Birmingham jail that we should be concerned about white moderates. That's actually not what Martin Luther King said. What he said is we should be worried about the silence of white moderates.
Are you kidding me?
Nina, wait.
No, she's making a language point.
What he said was we should worry about the silence of white moderates.
Chris, what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about, he said it is the point that the white moderate wants things to be comfortable, and instead of focusing in on that, the bigger threat is not necessarily the white KKK member, but more the white moderate that is more comfortable with keeping things the same or pretending like there is no tension.
Don't use Martin Luther King against Joe Biden. You don't have that. You don't have that standing.
First of all,
I'm sorry, you don't.
Don't tell me what kind of standing I have as a black woman in America. How dare you?
You have a lot of standing as a black woman in America. You don't have the standing to attack Joe Biden using Martin Luther King's words.
I didn't attack anybody. You're taking it that way. Listen, don't dip into what I have to say about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. How dare you, as a white woman, sit up here and try to tell me,
that is not what I said.
To tell me
don't you do that.
What I'm supposed to feel and what I'm doing right now.
I'm out of time on this.
That's something, Chris, I didn't jump in on her,
Nina,
though. And then she wants to jump in on me and give
first
me
of all, it's not nobody's jumping in on anybody. You guys are in the same party.
Was that not one of the craziest attempts of gaslighting that you've ever seen in your life? And it's particularly egregious because this is how Hillary Rosen, that's her name, this is how she chose to respond, with additional gaslighting. She tweeted, "I'm horrified that anyone would think I would call Nina Turner an angry black woman. I would never. After the TV hit last night, I was getting tons of ugly messages to keep fighting her using that phrase. I was trying to tell people to stop because I knew I needed to apologize. But screenshots are forever?" Because this was just deleted, but she said, "Please no need to defend me and attack angry black women." There it is. How is that defending Nina Turner? Just such obvious backtracking. My God. And on to the substance of what she was trying to say on Cuomo's show. The silence of that quote, that's not in the letter. Here it is. MLK, in his own words, Nina Turner was exactly right, and Biden is exactly the kind of white moderate that Dr. King was warning of. He wrote this from very famously letters from the Birmingham jail in 1963. "I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action,' who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." It is hard to find a more prescient quote than that. It is super relevant today, obviously. Bernie Sanders represents the boldness of action that MLK is talking about there. And the reason that Hillary Rosen doesn't want to talk about Biden's record on race is that it's atrocious. Years after Bernie Sanders was arrested fighting for civil rights, Biden was a proponent of some aspects of segregation. He was anti-busing. He was working with Strom Thurmond. He authored the crime bill. He keeps denying it, but that locked up millions of Black Americans. So that's why she gets so defensive. And it's absolutely crazy that you could sit there and have the gall to tell a Black woman what MLK means.